Sam Newman with the Clemson Insider is our special guest. It's time for a Clemson football preview. This is ACC Nation. If you're following us on YouTube, that's Will Ogenin. I'm Jim Quist. Welcome, Sam. We appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be back. It feels like it's been a bit, but football season has definitely come upon us, and excited to be back on here with you guys.
I like how you put that. It's come upon us.
It has.
It's not like we haven't had months for, but it does sneak up on us. That's for sure. All right, listen, we haven't had these kind of questions about Clemson for what seems like, forever. We got changes at the offensive and defensive coordinator positions. Obviously, that means maybe there's going to be some changes on the field, or will there be?
I think schematically it's going to be pretty much similar. Brandon Streeter and Wesley Goodwin were obviously already on staff. I mean, Goodwin was Venables' right-hand man. I don't think you're going to be seeing blitzes or plays being called in at the last second like Venables likes to do. I'll probably go over to Oklahoma. But, Streeter was in the box, or Streeter was on the field, and Elliott was in the box. But, he has experience as being an offensive coordinator at Liberty and in the past and in Richmond as well. So the numbers you were able to put up there kind of speak for themselves. And, Goodwin, I think Dabo Swinney, knew that there was going to be some blowback with that hire just because it's not a household name. But anybody you talk to, anybody around the program says, Wes is the guy. And, he seems ready for it. I think we got a taste of that Iowa State, in the Cheez-It Bowl. I don't think you're going to see completely similar to every aspect. I mean, obviously they're going to add their own flair, what they like to do, but I think schematically Clemson is going to look pretty similar to what they've looked to in the past. Obviously different coordinators. You can't expect it to be, I guess a carbon copy of what we saw, but I don't think that the changes are going to be as drastic as some people might think when you see a new coordinator come in. I think that's kind of what Dabo Swinney was going with when he promoted from within. And, the last time he kind of went externally that he hired somebody defensively was Brent Venables. So these are the guys that he's had in his mind really to be those guys to kind of take that next step. And, he's mentioned that Streeter and Goodwin have opportunities elsewhere. They chose to stay at Clemson. So I think it kind of just speaks to they're going to not the status quo, but just kind of continue to be that Clemson team that we've come to expect on both sides of the football.
Says a lot about Dabo that he has the managerial skills to set it up to make that transition, because that is not an easy thing to do, obviously, especially two higher profile guys like that. Question for you, and this is more subjective than anything. Have you noticed any noticeable impact on Dabo's outlook for his team with this sudden shift away from his top two coordinators and having a year that was off? Has he taken a different approach? Is he walking differently, chewing gum differently than normal?
I wouldn't say he's taken a different approach. Just kind of being around him and seeing, I think he's kind of kept the same, mentality. I think he's been, like we kind of alluded to earlier, he's been preparing for the moment to lose those two coordinators. I mean, both Tony Elliott and Brent Venables have been rumored to be getting head coaching jobs for years and years now. So he's been preparing for that moment. Maybe the only way that I see him talking differently is maybe that they have a little bit more confidence than they did last season, maybe in the offensive line and just some of those additional pieces. And DJ is slimmer and he looks more agile and definitely put in the work. So Dabo is never going to. I don't think he's always good at putting up kind of just a good team mentality and as who he is. And I don't, and he doesn't kind of sway one way or the other, but I think he ultimately is, there hasn't been much of a noticeable difference or change that you might think with the shifts in coordinators. So I think it kind of just speaks to who he is and how he can, like you said, his managerial skills and how he can kind of navigate that storm, because not everybody can, usually when you're having to place your offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, it's not because two teams are hiring them. It's because you have to make some changes in order to keep your job. That's not the case here. I think it's just like the success of this program. Even if it was a down year, they still won 10 games. We're going to kind of keep going in this direction of the program that we are. So, I mean, I haven't seen a big attitude shift. I think, like I said, not even just from him, but I think, the only thing discernible difference is maybe a little bit more confidence in the offensive line unit than the year prior.
Interesting. You cannot say that Dabo doesn't have a truckload of confidence. I mean, the guy is overflowing. Let's get into a little more of the specifics on the offense and defense with Will.
Yeah, so the quarterback situation has been one that's been a talking point of the off season, whether it was drummed up by media when there really was nothing to really that there was there or whatever. But a lot of people thought Klubnik Kate Klubnik, the incoming freshman, had a shot to really win the starter's job. But we know Dabo's MO is you really have to mess up in order to lose that job. But Klubnik is still expected to play some. To what extent do you see him playing this year?
I mean, I think that all kind of just depends on how DJ plays. As we've seen in the past, Dabo isn't afraid to, put politics aside in the quarterback room and kind of play the best chance to win. I mean, he played a freshman Trevor Lawrence and replaced him with Kelly, or replaced Kelly Bryant with Trevor Lawrence. I do expect Cade to play. Whether it's, in the second half of these games that are, maybe Furman or LA Tech or some games like that kind of remains to be seen. But, they're sticking with DJ as their starter. And I think like you kind of just said, Will, have to really mess up. I think they've made this, and this isn't an indictment on Cade. I think this is more so as DJ as a leader and how he's grown. Like they said, this is his team. So I think he does have a hole in the quarterback position, but Cade has definitely pushed him, and all indications looks great. He gives maybe a different element to a game where DJ is probably more of a, can make plays in the pocket with his arm, and Cade I like to compare a little bit to Zach Wilson, where he can kind of that was always my favorite comparison of him, where he can kind of make things happen out of chaos and make great throws on the run, and maybe a more agile runner, even though DJ has slimmed down. So I think that they both bring a lot to the table, but I think DJ has a stronghold on the quarterback position, but that doesn't mean Cade isn't going to play. I think Cade will play. It just kind of depends on how these games go. I mean, as we've come to find out in the past, Dabo even played his punter at quarterback in the past when those games get out of hand. So Clemson has always prided itself as a program who plays everyone, who gets guys on the field. That didn't really happen last year because they played so many close games. And to be quite honest, I think just speaking, from here, Hunter Helms and Billy Wiles weren't on scholarship last year, and when Tyson Pumchan had come in, the ability to throw the ball had kind of went down a little bit. So I think they feel very good about the 5 quarterbacks that they have, and you'll definitely see 2 of them. How many more, I'm not sure, but I do think Cade will play it and see some time on the field.
The running back is really strong. Obviously, Will Shipley was a little bit banged up last year as a freshman, but when he did play, he was really strong at running back. And obviously, we saw a lot of Kobe Pace as well. They obviously like to run 2 backs, and sometimes you might see a 3rd back and Phil Maffa get in there. So how do you see the carry shaking out with all of them this year?
I think it's going to be a 3-headed monster, but I think kind of in the order that you brought it up, like it's probably going to be Shipley. Like Shipley's probably going to be the starter, but they really have 3 guys who could probably start on college teams back there. But I think they'll get their fair share of even splits back there. I think all of them bring kind of a different element to the table. They really like Phil Maffa. Kobe Pace showed a lot last year, and Shipley, when he was healthy, he did. I feel like a couple of turf monsters and maybe getting tripped up. That there was a lot of plays where Shipley, you look at it, he was like, if he didn't trip up right there, he probably could have broke a touchdown or something like that. So I think he left a lot of plays on the field last year. He knows that, but I think Clemson's expecting big things from him this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's like, I wouldn't say he's a bell cow. I don't think Clemson has offense right now is designed necessarily to what they have in the backfield to have a bell cow back. But if you're asking me who I think is going to be the when they go out there against Georgia Tech, who I think is going to be the starter, I think it'll be Shipley, but not like the quarterback position, but I think all three of them are going to see a lot of time. And then, they have 5 running backs on scholarship. They placed Dominique Thomas, who they have dubbed the nickname of Quadzilla. So he was placed on scholarship. A great story there. He's more of a short yardage back, going to knock your teeth, going to hit you in your teeth. And then Keith Adams Jr. is a guy that is a kid who's a freshman. They like his potential. His father played linebacker at Clemson. But I think you're more likely going to see him, knock on wood, no injuries, going to see him redshirt. And if he does play, it'll be special teams.
So the receiver unit was a little bit banged up again last year. As we talked about, the little injuries at running back. There were quite a few injuries at receiver. But it kind of pressed some guys like Bo Collins, Dakari Collins to play, a lot more as a freshman as expected. But you get Joseph Nada back, who was healthy, Brennan Spector back. This is a team that, when you look at catch totals, they weren't very high. There were just a lot of people who caught a lot of passes, and maybe that levels out with some health. But do you have concerns at receiver, especially in terms of depth?
I mean, I think, obviously the injuries are what they are, but I think they're getting healthier right now. I think they're pretty deep at receiver. They obviously lost Troy Stellato for the season, who tore his ACL. It's fortunate for him. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy since he's gotten to Clemson. Adam Randall is Clemson has, put guys in different colored jerseys at practice. The last time we were out at practice, he was wearing a green jersey, which means you can do drills, just no contact. Yellow is you're working to the side. So Bo Collins hasn't been dressed out and jammed his shoulder. I think the expectation is that he might be back this week for practice. We'll find out Wednesday and Thursday when we talk to the coordinators and Dabo. But I think overall, and just kind of going through it, and like you said, I think Ngata is healthy probably for the first time in his career, and they wanted to keep it that way. Bo Collins has a shoulder thing, but you're hoping that isn't going to keep him off the field. And then Brandon Spector is finally healthy as well. So those guys are probably your starters, with Spector in the slot and the other two on the outside. Bo Collins can play a little bit of everywhere, but you're right. There are injury concerns with all three of them. And that was definitely a position that took there was a lot of attrition there, and roster attrition in terms of injuries. EJ Williams is back now. He had a knee scope in the spring, but he had a hematoma on his back that caused him to miss some time in the fall. I think he should be healthy. But if you kind of want to go down the list here, you have EJ Williams, Adam Randall, Dakari Collins, Cole Turner, Antonio Williams. I feel like I might be missing somebody, but they do have good depth there. They have, 3 freshmen who I think can all play. They don't want them to play all have to play right away, but they can all play. So I think the depth there is a little stronger, but you're right. There are some injury concerns, and you kind of hope and pray for these guys' sakes that they stay healthy, because there is a lot of talent in that room. It's just about them staying on the field. I think Ngata is a guy who can play on Sundays. Bo Collins is a great start to his career, and Spector, nobody has really seen a lot of him because he dealt with COVID and the ramifications with that. He had a wrist injury in the spring. So that's a guy that they're excited about. And the name that I was forgetting was Will Taylor, who tore his ACL early last year, but they said he's fast. He's faster, back better than ever. So they're excited about him. I think there's a lot of, I would be cautiously optimistic about what they have in the receiver room, because there are injury concerns and there are guys who have past injury history, but I think the depth is better this season. I would definitely argue that the depth there is better.
4 starters back on the offensive line, and it's a pretty veteran group, totaling about 70-ish starts. So I don't see that to be much of an issue this year, at least amongst the starters.
Yeah, for the offensive line, The funny part, I wouldn't say the funny part, but they're kind of going with the best 5 guys out there. And from all indication that we've gotten is, they're going to have 4 returning starters and then a true freshman at right tackle. So they're going with, they're pretty much going with the best 5 guys on the field. Jordan McFadden returns starting at left tackle. Obviously, he's probably one of the best tackles in the ACC. Marcus Tate back at left guard. He kind of got thrown in the fire his first game against Jordan Davis. That's a lot to ask out of a true freshman. And then they've moved Will Putnam from right guard to center. And from all indications, he's done a great job. And it sounds like Walker Parks, who was one of the better right tackles in the conference, I thought McFadden and Parks were their 2 steady guys last year when there was a lot of, not good in the inside. So they shifted Parks inside to right guard, and all indications that Blake Miller is going to start at right tackle. So I don't have enough knowledge of seeing Walker Parks to know if he's as good at right guard as he is as right tackle. What I do know is, just the way that they've spoken about Blake Miller as a right tackle. He's definitely shot up. Jordan McFadden, even the other day, said, he's a lot better than I was as a freshman. So the fact that he's already in line to start, I think it maybe draws a little bit concern at the guys that they do have at right guard, but I think it also says that Miller might be a guy that you just can't keep off the field, and we have to find a way to get him out there. And by doing that, that's moving Walker Parks to right guard and him at right tackle. So I do think they have their best 5 guys out there, but I think we'll have to see how, obviously how that culminates.
We're talking with Sam Newman of the Clemson Insider, obviously about Clemson football, because it's just about that time. This game that's coming up here in a few days, I really want to get into that. When we get into the schedule, I want to give you a heads up. I want to talk about whether or not this opening consensus line of 21.5 points toward Clemson is realistic. And so I'm putting that out there now for you to chew on for a little bit. What I want to get into right now, we talk about these injuries, and injuries, when you start seeing a lot of injuries pop up, and especially year after year, especially if you see this in the pros, you start getting this feeling that somebody maybe is going to be looking for a job. Is there any indication that this is something that is just happenstance, or is this training, diet, etc.? Because there's all these things come together to make people healthy and top performing athletes. So has that ever been something that's been tossed out on the table?
You obviously hear fans' concerns, and you grapple with it, but I think at the same time it's just kind of happenstance. It's a game of football. Really, anything can happen. And to your point, they did hire a new director of football athletic training. Their old director there, his name is escaping me right now. It's going to bother me, but he retired. So they hired Pat Richards. They did a national search. And from all indications and everything that these guys have said, that he's really done a good job with training and new methods of recovery and stuff like that. So I don't want to speak out of turn in just terms of like, do I see anything discernible that's injuries happen? I've been watching, I think we've all been watching football a long time. Injuries tend to happen in this sport, and they tend to find you in clusters. Maybe if there's a consistent pattern but I can't say anything that if I have any tangible evidence, but I do think that them maybe having a new director of athletic training and football training, I do think that maybe you look at that and you hope that that's a step in the right direction. But
To be
You know,
truthful, Sam, that was the whole reason that I brought that question up, because I wanted you to expound a little bit on the fact that there has been a change. Because, when, it's like you say, when fans see a lot of injuries and stuff, it starts raising a red flag. It's like, who's not doing, what's happening here, right? And of course, a fan doesn't get that inside view that you're getting
yeah,
as to the changes and stuff. So I quite frankly, I think, based upon, if I were a fan of Clemson and you told me that, I would feel a lot better about the direction and the possibility that those, I don't know, I won't say rampant injuries because that's not right, but just a lot of injuries, which I always thought were just like, why is this happening?
yeah. Well, I think it's one thing if it's like, you know, this guy, this whole position group is dealing with a hamstring injury and this, that, and the other. But when it's like guys are tearing their ACLs, somebody jammed their shoulder, somebody has a hematoma on their back, it's you start, okay, this is just kind of a part of fielding a football team. It's a physically demanding sport, and unfortunately injuries come with it. So I think, like I said, if there's patterns and I think for an example, if guys are continually pulling their hamstring, not that this has happened with Clemson, just putting an example out there, and then maybe you're like, okay, are they doing right thing? But I think you kind of just look at this as kind of what it is with football. And, it's just like last year, when you're having a rough time of it, I feel like injuries just tend to find you. That's kind of how I feel about it. So, I'm no medical expert, but I feel like it's just part of the game. But like I said, if there's something like a pattern there, maybe like, all these, receivers have hamstring injuries this week. Okay, maybe that's time that you start thinking about it. But no, I think maybe having a new director of athletic training might help in the sense that hopefully you're hoping that, those injuries become few and far
Diminished.
between, but you'll obviously just kind of have to see.
Yeah. I tell you what, from the medical expert standpoint, you need to stay at a Holiday Inn Express more often, my friend. I tell you,
Fair point.
that'll get you where you need to go. Hey, on paper, and from what I'm seeing, this defense looks like it could be monstrous. Now, I think that's going to be the thing. And the defense really made the difference last year when the offense wasn't pulling their weight completely. That may be to some degree the case again to at least the beginning of the season. We'll see how it works out. We'll see whether DJ gets back into a groove, like everyone is hoping that he can, except for his opponents. But what is the one thing? And I guess the transition here was from injuries about the only thing that could stop this defense from really becoming all that. So give us some thoughts on the defense, and then we'll get into more particulars with Bill.
Yeah, no, I think this defense has a chance to be something special. I don't want to. I think there's a lot of expectations. I don't really want to place any on them because you still want to see how they look under a first-year defensive coordinator. But the defensive line they have is just kind of it's menacing, and it's if you're an opposing team, it's definitely intimidating. The guys that they have there, granted that they'll probably be down Xavier Thomas for the first 4 weeks with he suffered a foot injury and got surgery. And I think the expectation right now is that he could be back for the Wake Forest game week 4, but we'll see. But they have guys they have 4 defensive ends who could start. So with Justin Maskell, Miles Murphy, and KJ Henry, it's obviously excluding Xavier Thomas. They feel excited about Kevin Swint. Really a lot of talent in that interior defensive line. And then you move the linebacker. You lose 2 seasoned veterans in James Skalski and Balen Spector, who have that football IQ off the charts. Their instincts are great, but when losing them, you probably gain a little bit of athleticism. And I think Clemson is probably more athletic than they've ever been at linebacker. just Trenton Simpson and what he's able to do. I mean, he theoretically could lead this team in sacks if you let him. He could just kind of run around the field and do just about everything. Derek Carter is a guy who's going to start at Sam for them. And, he worked with when we watched practice, he was going back and forth between linebackers and safeties. They have a lot of good players at the linebacker position. That's not even mentioning Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And then, they have that's a position battle that'll go up probably into before kickoff at Georgia Tech between him and Keith McGuire. I'll be excited to see who gets that job, but there's a lot of depth in that defense. I think Wes Goodwin said that they probably have 15 to 18 guys that could start, which is reasonably good depth. I think they're very strong at safety with Jalen Phillips and Andrew Makuba. Makuba was, an All-American freshman. Kid could probably play cornerback and do just as well. You're going to see him in nickel situations, play that Sam role maybe in some nickel situations. And they're really excited about him. I think cornerback might be the only question mark, just because you go from having to establish starters and Andrew Booth and Mario Goodrich, who are both now in the NFL. But Sheridan Jones has been waiting for his opportunity. They feel really good about him. Nate Wiggins, you've asked anybody who's done the most work to kind of get to where they are now, who's surprised, who's flashed. Nate Wiggins is your answer. Fred Davis the second has come on along as well. And then you have, Malcolm Green, a guy that people forget about because he's dealt with shoulder injuries since he was in high school, but he's a very talented player who you could conceivably see in the nickel. And then you're not even mentioning those haven't even mentioned those two freshman cornerbacks that they really like, in Jaden Lucas and Toriano Peratt Jr., and both of them could play right away. So I think they have a lot of talent there. They have a lot of depth. They have a lot of firepower. It's going to be one of the nation's top defenses. I think we can maybe all agree on that if not one of the best, if not the best, one of the best. But I think that's what Clemson's going to hang its hat on this season. And, I'm not going to sit here and, and say like, oh, the offense is only going to, have this many points per game. Like, we just don't know what Clemson's offense is going to look like. How improved is DJ in that? But I think this is a case where maybe if instances happen like last season, this defense could keep them in every single game this year, regardless of whether the offense struggles or not. I mean, even if the offense plays like it should, the defense is still going to, keep them in every game. And I think this is one of the better units that Dabo Swinney's had. And, I think they're just excited to snap the ball at this point and kind of see what they have out there. I mean, you talk about giving Wesley Goodwin, leaving him with the full cupboard. I think Brent Venables did that for sure.
It's a lot of high praise for this defense, considering some of the ones they've had over the past 3, 4, 5 years. But one of the players who's returning after missing most of last year with an injury is Brian Breezy. He was very highly touted out of his recruiting class. I think he's one of the highest commits Clemson's ever gotten. So what does his addition to this defensive line mean to this team?
I think it means everything. I mean, he is, he is a freak. I think it goes without saying. Knock on wood, he stays healthy. I mean, he definitely is a guy who could be, a top 5, top 10 NFL draft pick. I mean, I think he's just that talented. So I think having a full season of him and the guys that came in after and did a great job, like, Rook, Tyler Davis, Trey Williams, they all played relatively well, but Brian Brzee is just at a different level. I mean, there's a reason why he, you look at him and he's first team all ACC, first team all, Associated Press. I just think he's, they said that he's I think I can't remember which one of his teammates, but they're like, he's back, he's better than ever. I mean, there's definitely not a guy that you have to worry about coming out to play. What you're going to get from him, and it's going to be 100%. And I mean, I know I'm delivering high praise here, but he's a very, very good player. I think it definitely means everything for this defense, and to have him hopefully healthy. I think he got maybe his shoulder cleaned up and, the ACL. So you're hoping that you get a clean bill of health with him and, he can put together a special season because he is a special player.
You mentioned Trent Simpson a moment ago as the only returning starter at linebacker. And for someone who had a big season and it kind of went unnoticed on the national level, do you see him as someone that just could explode on the national scene this year?
Oh, absolutely. I think Trent Simpson is just scratching the surface of his potential. I think he's a really, really talented player, and anybody around the program will tell you that. He's real good. He's really good, like Brzee, and I think just like I said, I mean, I think he's going to be a household name by the season's over, and he's already a name that I think has been going around in NFL draft circles already. Not that anything that I've heard personally, but I mean, if you look at any mock draft, and granted they're mock drafts for a reason, we don't know, but the fact that his name was already there when he quietly had a really good season kind of tells you how the rest of the league. I think somebody who knows the program very well, Eric McLean over the ACC network, he thinks that he predicted that Trent Simpson could be the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, and I think there's definitely a good chance that you can see that. I think Mark Richt actually said that as well. I mean, he's just one of the more athletic prospects on Clemson's roster, and there's a reason he was a 5-star coming out of high school.
I know. I think you've had enough time to go over to think about Jim's answer earlier. So Jim, let's get into the schedule.
All right. We're going to start with that 21.5 point. And this is a consensus odds. This could change. This was something that was posted today. This opening game on the 5th in Atlanta, not at Georgia Tech, but in Atlanta, the Chick-fil-A kickoff game. Is that 21.5 a little bit overboard, or is that a reasonable thing from your perspective?
I mean, if you're basing it off last year's game, it probably is a bit overboard, but I think in terms of just not knowing what you're going to see from Georgia Tech is probably from a betting perspective a reasonable number, just because this is a team that had a lot of roster attrition. They have to go to the transfer portal for a lot of their current roster right now. Their best player from last season is now in Tuscaloosa. He's probably one of the best running backs in the nation. There's a lot of turnover on the coaching staff, and Jeff Collins is I don't want to say that he's coaching for his job, but probably the closest thing to it right now. So
he's coaching for his job. I'll say it.
Okay, you can say it. Close, very close to it. But I think just from a betting perspective, it's a reasonable number just because of the unknown factor there. I personally, when I make my prediction, I don't think I'm going to predict Clemson to win by 21 points or more. I just think Georgia Tech played them tough last year, and this season is important for Jeff Collins and his staff. I could be wrong here when you could get a similar instance to where I think Clemson and Jeff Collins' first game at Georgia Tech, they blew him out of the water. It was like 56-0 or something of that nature. I could be very off base here, but I can see Georgia Tech playing them close for a couple quarters. I mean, I think Clemson is probably going to win by double digits, a couple touchdowns, but I think just from the unknown factor, and that's probably why the betting line is that high, just because you don't know what you're going to get out of Georgia Tech at this point. And
especially when it's considered home for them. So
we'll see what type of crowd they get in that game. Well, I mean, as we know, Atlanta's not too far down the road. Take I-85 down south, and you're there quick if you miss the traffic. So
if I have to go downtown Atlanta for any reason, I don't want to go. Worst interstate system in
Yeah,
the
I
world
should
down
put an
there.
asterisk down there quick without any traffic, but because it's 75% likelihood that you're going to get traffic unless you leave to go to the game at 6 a.m. on Monday morning.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm spending the night if I'm man, there's no way in the world I'm driving that. I've done it enough in my life. These next two games, I'm not going to get into. To be honest with you, I hate to put them in this category because honestly, I don't like the term, but the kind of cupcakes. Furman and Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech a little bit more of a challenge, I think, than Furman. Furman is sort of a tip of the hat to somebody in also in South Carolina. So, if you want to give us your thoughts on those two games.
I mean, I think very reasonably, it's I don't really have I can't say I've delved deep into either one of those teams. I would agree with you that Louisiana Tech is a bigger challenge than Furman. But you look at those games and you see, okay, if this is a program that wants to be in the playoff, I think this is a game where Cade Klubnik should be maybe in the game by the third or fourth quarter, those two games. I think that's what just kind of going out there. I mean, these are games that they should win comfortably. So I think it's important to kind of get off to a start like that at home. Even though they beat South Carolina State 49-3, it just didn't feel like that thumping that it probably should have been. And I mean, I think that was kind of the nature of the team and nature of the business. And, obviously the starters were out by the second half, but you looked at the scoreboard, you're like, wow, I thought it would be more almost. And I mean, they won by 46 points. Okay. But I think these are games that they should win comfortably and kind of put them onto a good, just put them on a good run with a week 4 matchup against Wake Forest kind of looming at Wake Forest.
One of the things I like about Dabo is that he tends not to run up scores on people.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why he put his punter in at quarterback.
That is sort of old school gentleman. And because, you never know when that stuff's going to come around and bite you in the rear end. Karma is, well, we know what karma is. Anyway, September 24th, Wake Forest, things have changed here. Now you're traveling there. But we don't have Sam Hartman in the slot. So things may be changed. However, the quarterback they do have is pretty seasoned and very capable. So what do you think?
I mean, I think Clemson handled them pretty well last year. And this was a team that you finally saw everything come together in that Wake Forest team. And you're like, okay, this was the team we heard about. This is the team that was supposed to be here. It's escaping my mind what type of offense, the concept that Wake Forest used, but I mean, Clemson was all over that last year. They snuffed that out just immediately. It's gonna bother me. But I think without Hartman, it makes that game that much tougher from Wake Forest. You would hope that their defense, which was, I mean, let's be honest, down the stretch last year, it was abysmal, is better. But I think you looked at that game on the schedule and you're like, wow, that could be one where Clemson really gets put on the ropes on the road against a team that was in the ACC championship game last year. But without Sam Hartman, and I know you said they have a seasoned guy that's in at quarterback, and I think that's without Sam Hartman. I mean, that's probably as good as it gets. And
Doesn't feel.
I like Dave Clawson, and I think he runs a good program, but it's just hard without your starting quarterback, who is one of the better quarterbacks in the nation, to really just feel comfortable about beating a team like that on the road or at home, even if Clemson has to go on the road there. I mean, that's, it's just Hartman is that much of a difference maker, in my opinion. And I'd be excited to see what this other quarterback has to offer, his backup, but you hope for Sam Hartman's sake. I don't think anybody's really in tune to what's going on except those around the program. But you hope for his sake that he's back sooner than later, because I do think it's something non-football medically related. So you hope and pray that for his sake that he's back on the field sooner than later. But I just can't see Wake Forest without him. Just with how the game went last year, it's kind of hard to be like, okay, this is a W for them. I think maybe if Sam Hartman was out there, you'd say, okay, Clemson might be on upset alert this week.
So after that, on October 1st might be the biggest game of the season with NC State at home. And a lot of people are really high on NC State that think that they are a dark horse playoff team. What do you see in that game? That's going to be a very tough game.
Oh, I think it's going to be definitely a very tough game. I wouldn't overlook NC State. I think Devin Leary is one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. I think Dorn has done a great job getting, that team together. And, quite honestly, they were pretty close to being in the ACC championship game last year. Things just didn't go their way. But I think that's going to be one of Clemson's tougher game of the season. I think what they have going for them is that game is in Death Valley at Memorial Stadium. And as we know, Clemson doesn't lose a lot of games there. So I think having home field advantage will definitely be a factor, but it's going to be a slugfest. I really do think so. NC State will be one of the. I fully expect both of those teams to be ranked going into that game, and I think that'll be one of the more exciting games of the season. Hopefully, I don't think maybe any of us here envision that being a blowout. I don't on either side. I think you're going to get a good old fashioned slugfest.
Week after that, you travel up to Chestnut Hill to take on Boston College, which a game that Clemson should be favored, but depending on how the NC State game goes, could be a little bit of a letdown situation there.
Yeah, definitely. Chestnut Hill is a tough place to play. I do think Boston College getting their quarterback back for another season and having Zay Flowers, even though he had the chance to leave, is and you stay in there at that program. I do really like what Hafley's done there. I do think the one thing with BC is they've had a lot of turnover on that offensive line. Yeah, you're right that theoretically could be a letdown game. It could be a trap game, having to go up there. But, if Clemson plays like we expect them to, I think this is a game they should be able to handle. But I wouldn't overlook Boston College by any stretch of the imagination.
And in the week after,
the backup quarterback, who, let's be honest, didn't play well. They almost won that game against Clemson in Death Valley. So, yeah, the Boston College ain't a team I want to let hang around. That's for sure.
For sure. And then after that, down to Tallahassee against Florida State. And obviously, the Noles looked really, really strong against an FCS team over the weekend, but we can only take so much out of that. But again, it feels like a game Clemson should be favored in.
Yeah. I think one thing, like I said, Clemson hangs its hat on its defense, but even though it was an SCF's opponent, I think Florida State's offense looked really good. I think Jordan Travis does a lot of things well for his skill set. And, they had if I'm not mistaken, they had 3 running backs run for over 100 yards in that game. So it should be a tough contest. I don't think Norvell's necessarily coaching for his job, but this is a big game, and that I'm sure they have circled. It's another one that kind of came down to the last minute last season. It was obviously a 10-point in Clemson's favor, but theoretically, it was if I'm not mistaken, it was a 20. I think it was a 24-20 game at one point. So, it ended up being 30-20. I think Clemson scored a touchdown on, when there was laterals and all that at the end of the game. But
yep, that's exactly. I remember that now. That's exactly what happened. Yep,
now
that's
that
exactly
they don't have Jermaine Johnson, who definitely gave Clemson a lot of fits last season.
Yeah, for sure. And then next game after that is October 22nd at home against Syracuse. And this is a team that some people think won't be very good this year, but some people think with the offensive staff changeover that they could be a little bit of a sleeper.
Yeah, I think Syracuse quietly has one of the best running backs in the nation in Sean Tucker. He's a really good player, really, really good player. He gave Clemson fits. Clemson did not play well at Syracuse. They were lucky to come out of Syracuse with a win. The quarterback play there just wasn't good enough, but I mean, I think this is a game that Clemson should be able to, elevate its play and, play like they're supposed to. I just don't think Syracuse can kind of hang with the top dogs of the ACC at this point. But you're right, there is a new offensive staff there, and kind of interested to see kind of how that maybe changes the way that they go about things this season, especially with them probably being a pretty run-heavy offense with how good Tucker is back there.
So everybody gets to go trick-or-treating for Halloween because that's an open date. And then next up, beginning of November, it's Notre Dame. This is going to be another challenging game when you have to go to South Bend. It's just a big what if.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I know Notre Dame is obviously not favored to beat Ohio State, and I don't think you can use that game as a barometer of where they are at as a program, just because this is Marcus Freeman's first, maybe second game as a head coach. I believe he coached the bowl game. But yeah, I mean, Ohio State's probably going to be one of the teams that plays for a national championship this year. Is Notre Dame there yet? I mean, we'll see. But I don't think we can use week one as a barometer for where Notre Dame's at. I don't think, even if this is a team that has a couple losses next to its name come that time, doesn't matter. You're playing in South Bend. We know the last time Clemson was there, they lost. So, and DJ played really well there, really, really well in a losing effort. So I know Clemson probably has a sour taste in their mouth after losing there. They kind of really already made up for it by kind of beating up on Notre Dame in that ACC championship game in Charlotte later that season. But, you probably want to go back up to South Bend and win, because if you're making your resume for a playoff, that's a win you're going to need to have.
It's a big one. That would be a big one. And we finish out the schedule here with Louisville, Miami, and South Carolina. Louisville on the 12th, Miami on the 19th. That could be a very challenging game. South Carolina slowly but surely starting to wake up. But I don't think they're there yet. What do you?
Yeah, I don't think they're there yet, but I've cautioned Clemson fans to not put their nose up at them, and I understand that.
Yeah.
That I understand why they do, and obviously Clemson has been the superior opponent, but South Carolina's done a good job of recruiting the state. I think just going off the recruiting numbers, and South Carolina has 3 of the top 4 players in the state committed to them. I don't think Clemson necessarily. I think Clemson only offered. I don't know if they offer those guys, but they were interested in them. But I think it does say a lot about Shane Beamer and his staff that they have 3 of those 4 top guys, and then they already have a head start with a lot of 2024 guys. So I know Clemson fans, South Carolina has been in butt of jokes for years since Clowney left, pretty much. But I don't think they're there yet. I think this is still a game that Clemson wins and pretty handily. But that's not a team that I would be like. But I know that obviously that there's there's always going to be that notion, but until they prove it. But like I said, on the recruiting trail, I recover recruiting for a living. There's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of smoke there with that South Carolina team. Obviously, they need to prove it on the field now that what Beamer is kind of concocted there is working. And I think going 6-6 and winning a bowl game in his first season is you're kind of on that direction. But yeah, and just the other 2 games, I think if that Louisville game was in Kentucky, that might be one where I would project a loss. I mean, they were this close to beating Clemson. Malik Cunningham left that game. He got hurt. I think he came back and just lost his footing. But they were right there at the goal line, and Clemson made a stop. I think Cunningham might be the best quarterback in the ACC. That's a hot take that I have. I don't know if it'll be a hot take after the season, but I think he's one of the best players in the ACC for sure. Maybe one of the best quarterbacks. And it'd be exciting to see what Miami will look like under Cristobal. I don't really know how comparable it is to make that to South Carolina, but I don't think they're quite there yet. But once Cristobal is kind of able to bring in some of these recruiting classes that are very strong, I think that's going to be a team that you're really going to have to worry about down there in Coral Gables. I just don't know if this is the season where they're there yet. So on paper, yeah, it's a tough stretch to end the season, but I think Clemson is lucky that all three of those games are going to be played at Memorial Stadium for sure.
Interesting. And you talking about Malik Cunningham might be one of the best quarterbacks. You know, the thing about the ACC is that from week to week, we don't know who we're going to.
That's true.
About, because there's so many good ones in here. And man, you know, I keep hearing it more and more, and really being pushed that the ACC is the quarterback conference, and man, loaded. Can't deny that. Hey, we invite you to subscribe to ACC Nation on your favorite podcast and streaming radio platforms. Be sure to like and subscribe to ACC Nation on YouTube. We want to thank our special guest, Sam Newman of the Clemson Insider. If you're looking for the latest on the Tigers, make sure that you follow Sam on Twitter, and be sure to subscribe to the ClemsonInsider.com. Thanks, Sam, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.